Okay. And Frank said that if you want change to happen, you have to look within. Yeah. So the first thing you have to do is you have to see, what am I doing that might be hurting or upsetting somebody else? And when you come to the realization what that might be, I think you need to confront that person. You need to apologize, and then you need to listen to them. You need to be in their space and understand what they're saying and why what you did was hurtful, or because we tend to always just look at ourselves and go, well, they're what they're doing to me, what they're destroying in me, but we never look at what we might be doing to somebody else.
Another episode of the SpeakReal Podcast, sharing one-on-one conversations. We believe that storytelling is the best way to empower youth and give them the platform to find their voices.
Presented by YouthSpeak. Youth experience, youth voice, youth empowered.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the SpeakReal Podcast. I am your host today, Carson, and today we are joined by Heather Resnick. Before we jump into this, we want to thank TD for partnering with us on our podcast and IG Lives. Let's just jump into it. So, Heather, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I grew up in government subsidized apartments, okay? My parents were always having money problems, and they used to fight all the time. So we were basically poor,
Right.
according to certain standards, right? And there were 4 buildings, and everyone's mother was everyone else's mother. And so we were raised by a village. But as kids, we absolutely hated being under the watchful eye of every single mother, right? So an example would be when I was 14 or 15, I was smoking cigarettes on the weekend or something. I was standing in the parking lot, and one of our nosy neighbors was looking out from her balcony, and I just called up and said, "My mother already knows," because I knew she was going to go and tell my mother that I was smoking, right? Anyway, and then at 12, it was my dream to be a journalist. I really want to move people with my words, with actions and emotions. And I worked really hard to get into journalism at Humber College. But once I got there was such an overload of work, and I guess I was really immature and I couldn't handle it. So after 3 months, I quit. And it was like a dagger to my heart, because this had been my dream since I was 12, and now I'm, 18, and my dream isn't going to happen. My parents were really disappointed. Plus, they had spent money for me to go to the college, which at the time wasn't really a lot of money, but to them, they didn't have the money to begin with. So I felt very guilty. Then I became a library clerk, and I worked for the Ministry of Environment in the Resource Lab Library. And then I went back to Seneca College to be trained as a paralegal. And I worked in law offices in Ottawa and Toronto until the birth of my son. And I stayed home by choice. But that was a choice that haunted me for years. I love my children, but it was a major challenge for me to just stay. I mean, at that age, it was a different world than it is today. And a lot of women just stayed home with their children. And I was lucky that my husband was able to provide for the whole family, right?
Yeah.
So, it's really important that a parent look after their children when they're young, before they're at school. But it would have been better had I been able to work part-time, at least have some kind of independent life away from my children. So that's one thing that I have been battling for years. It took me years, and finally, about 10 years ago, I'm sort of at peace with my decisions.
Yeah.
then I did, all the usual things with my children, the parent-child programs, and my husband was always really supportive, which was great. Um, and then I started a clothing company for children. I had a manufacturer make children's grow clothes. I can show you if you want an example. Would you like to see?
Sure.
This was like, it's hard to put babies when they're wiggling all over into. So we did snaps on both sides so you can make the opening bigger so it's not like squishing over their head. And there were double sets of snaps in the legs, and then the cuffs were all longer, and then there was dolman sleeves so that they could grow. And it probably would have turned out really great. But I was working 12 hours a day. My parents were babysitting my son at the time, and I felt really guilty that it was supposed to be a part-time job. So
Mhm.
I left that, and I was really upset about that. Then I got involved in many volunteer projects, and sometimes I even resented all the hard work that I was doing for them, and I was never offered any financial reward. I know I started off as a volunteer, but sometimes you kind of hope it'll turn into, a financial employment, right?
Yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from with that. I did a very similar thing, starting at 18, and it only recently started to gain some financial traction. So I get
Right.
that.
Right. So, I was always home, but I wasn't always present in my mind and body for my children. And, there's a lot of guilt that goes along with that. And then one year in 1989, I saw a notice up at my son's private school. They were looking for docents for the Anne Frank in the World exhibit that came to Toronto at Ontario Place. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. I would like to do that, but I didn't know what a docent was. So I went into the office and I said, well, I'd like to sign up, but I don't know what a docent is. And she said, oh, it's just a guide. And I said, okay, fine. So I signed up. We had intensive training on the Holocaust, on World War II, on Anne Frank, but we had to write our own script.
Hmm.
So the very first day I wrote a script, and my face was buried in my script. It was really boring. And then I don't know what happened, but suddenly I felt very confident that I knew what I was talking about, and I was just going to free flow my talk. And I got amazing response from the students. They were asking questions, the girls were crying, the boys were really into the violent stuff, that's what really interested them. But all of a sudden I had an epiphany that I wanted to be a high school teacher so that I could teach history and Anne Frank wouldn't have died in vain. So my daughter was only 3 at the time, and I wanted to wait until she was 5 in permanent, school all day before I could go back to university. So I crafted my life so that I'd be involved in things where I was working with students. I volunteered at summer camps, and I was doing girl guides, like was a girl guide leader, and I was helping assist uh, some teachers in their classroom with their students. And then I got accepted to York when my daughter was 5, and it was a balancing challenge to be a mother, to be a wife, and to be a student. And I even cut down on some of my classes, so I tried to always be home when my kids came home. I tried not to do stuff on the weekend, but it was really, really hard. And by cutting down some of the courses, so I wasn't taking as many during the year, I wasn't able to, I just wasn't able to do it all. I thought I was drowning, actually. And I was about to quit, but my husband just said, you just continue. I'll do all the parenting stuff. Don't worry about it. He was an amazing support system.
I
So
love to hear that.
I ended up graduating with an honors BA on the dean's list. I just worked really, really hard. And I was like more than 20 years older than a lot of the students. I was closer to the professor's age, right? So I wanted to get into the faculty of ed, but then at the end of my 5 years of getting my BA, I got a cancer. And I went for treatment. I had radiation and a lumpectomy. And then I took some time off. And then I applied to the faculty of ed. I got into U of T, faculty of ed. And it was a real shock, I guess, to be in the faculty of education. And I didn't buy into a lot of their new wave teaching, and it was very deconstructed for me, to say the least. And the students too. I was a lot older, and they had different points of view, and sometimes we just did not see eye to eye. But my problem happened when I had a practicum, and the teacher, my mentor teacher, he was just an absolute fool, and I just had no respect for him. And then I started getting a cold, and I never recovered from the cold, and I didn't want to get cancer again. But all these things started happening when I was in the practicum, and then he would tell me off in front of other teachers, or he would do stupid things like one of the incidents that happened. It was Halloween, and I was wearing a tinsel wig that was multicolored, right?
Ooh,
I thought,
fun.
and I even brought them some candies, which was ridiculous because the school actually had candy machines. They made a deal with the candy companies, we'll give you whatever,
Yeah.
and you put the machines out there. So these kids in grade 9, they were totally out of control. And the teacher never ever told them that they had to respect me the same way they have to respect him. And they didn't respect him anyway. He would say to one kid would say, "I hate your tie." And he would say, "Well, I hate your face." This was a teacher, right? And I was just like, oh my God, I can't take this, right? So I'm wearing this tinsel wig, and the class is going crazy, and and I I just totally lost it. And I said, "Okay, like, you're all out of control. You need to sit down. You need to just focus here." But I was like kind of elevating my voice, and I forgot I was wearing this tinsel wig, and it's all going like this, and the kids are going cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. And the vice principal walked by and saw this crazy teacher with this tinsel wig, and she goes and gets the teacher, who was not in the class because he had just had a car accident. He was more worried about his car than he was about being in the classroom. So she said, "You have an out of control teacher in there." So he comes running in, and this is what he says to a grade 9 class. He says, "I want you, class, to write in your journal what Mrs. Resnick did wrong." This is grade 9 kids. And I said, "No, class, I want you to write in your journal what your responsibility is as a student." So, like, I was totally humiliated by this man. And I just knew, this is it. I can't, 9 years, it's from the time that my daughter was 3 until I went through the education, till I got into the faculty of ed, 9 years. And all of a sudden I just thought, I can't do this anymore. And like I said, I got this cold that wouldn't go away. And it turned out I had cancer number 2. And so I had to leave the faculty of ed. And honestly, when you have a dream and then it just falls apart, like, you're shattered. I was totally shattered. And then I had to deal with cancer. And the second cancer was life-threatening, and I had to have chemotherapy, and I thought I was going to die just from the chemotherapy. But, I took a year off after my cancer to kind of regroup my life. And I decided to revisit writing. And I had some articles published in a newspaper. And then I realized that how hard it was for women to get back into the workplace who had been out of the workplace for women. So I self-published. I took some self-publishing courses. I took a course on called Focus to try and help people to get back into a space where they're ready to go into employment. And I self-published a book called Women Rework, Empowering Women in Employment Transition. And it was never a commercial success, but I put all my heart and soul into it. But it just was not commercial success. I also wrote a novel at the time, which has never been published, but you never know, right? I would never self-publish it, but you never know. I'm like that. And then and I spent a lot of money like marketing my self-publishing book, and I met some really amazing people in my life in that world, and I also met some really uh, people who were very exploitive.
Oh,
So
I know it. I self-published a poetry collection in 2022, shortly before I started working here. And yeah, it can really be like you never know who you'll end up networking with in those scenarios, for sure.
I mean, it was an amazing experience. Just my life has been an amazing journey. Absolutely.
You've lived a lot of lives, so just based off what I've heard so far.
But I say, making money seemed like I was born to fail in that regard. Like it didn't work. Anyway, so I had to pick myself up once again and move on to my next adventure. So I worked for a year at Community Living. They asked me to do their newsletter, so I created their newsletter, and I, did it every month. And then cancer came again a third time, and it was devastating, but this time it wasn't as serious as it had been the second time. And the doctor had suggested I have, a short term of chemotherapy. And I said, no way. If you believe in God, I said, I'm in God's hands. I'm not going down that road again. I'm just not. Um, so here I am. That was in 2009, was the last bout, thank goodness. And I'm not just a survivor. I don't think. I think I'm a thriver. And I'm a lifetime learner, and I'm always taking courses, and I'm always doing workshops, and I'm always attending lectures and reading and learning and researching and meeting new people and listening. And I still volunteer, and I traveled a lot around the world. And then in around 2016 or 14, I started a menopause group because I was in menopause, and I thought that would be helpful. But then my father, who had Alzheimer's, it started to advance, and he wasn't living in a long-term care facility at the time. He was living in a retirement residence. So I kind of took over his primary care. I had to take him to all the appointments, and I had to arrange all his medications and all those things. And that was a very challenging thing to see somebody you love kind of just, they're a body and they're
Yeah.
nothing there.
Mm-hmm. I started again in retirement. I've seen it a few times. It's a lot.
It's very difficult. And then I became a guide for the Holocaust Museum, and I still write and I research the Holocaust. So just one thing to go back
Yeah.
about after I did the Anne Frank exhibit, I became a member of the committee of the Holocaust Education Week. And, we organized programs for the 2 weeks. And then, so I reintroduced libraries to be a focus of the program so people could go and listen to survivors speak in the library. And then the following year, I was asked to be chairperson for publicity. So I was able to get the opening night speaker on a popular radio show. And I formed a committee and was able to create a media package of all the media that would promote any of the programs for free, because we were a nonprofit. And so it was really important that they be able to promote, to do as much outreach, because, when you're talking about Holocaust education, you need to educate the people that don't know about the Holocaust. And then I became friends with a survivor from the Anne Frank exhibit with me, and she was like a survivor speaker, and we became very good friends. And she had written a story, and we were able to turn her story. It was for children, but it was related to the Holocaust, and we were able to turn her story into a puppet play. So throughout the years, I've had all kinds of involvement on and off with Holocaust education, and I'm not a child of a survivor, and I'm not a grandchild of a survivor, but it just was a topic that really resonated with me. So that's my life. Right now, I'm a guide for the Holocaust Museum.
Great to hear like your journey throughout like various you've worn many hats.
Yep.
I'm glad that you've kicked cancer's butt like 3 times. That is some powerful stuff. So much of what you've shared I could actually really resonate with. So I was like, oh, okay, hi. So I don't get that too much. Usually people will like talk about something and I'm like, I can understand that. But in this, I'm like, oh no, I can definitely feel like why you've chosen some of the choices you've made, and that feeling of, oh, I regret these choices here and there. I've been there. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you actually reached out to us to share your story. So do you mind sharing how you stumbled on YouthSpeak and why you decided to share your story and reach out to us with our viewers?
So I was reading the Toronto Star on February 25th, Sunday, February 25th. And in the A section under education, it was an article called Royalty Program. And they were talking about Robert Munch's children's book, The Paper Bag Princess.
Yeah.
And what they were talking about was, about bullying and that kind of thing. And I have been trying for a number of years to get my bullying story out. And no, yes, I was bullied, but I became a bully. But it had nothing to do with my bullying. I can tell you that in your next question about my bullying. But I've been trying to get my story out there for a very, very long time. And I had reached out, and then COVID happened, and, I made some connections. And then because of COVID, it just never happened. And then, I moved on with my life, but it was always in the back of my mind. And it's really important that I share it. So your organization was in that article, and I got in touch with Una, and it was when I called her, because I'm very impulsive. So it was that Sunday right after I read the article, and I called the number. I tracked down the number, and I wasn't expecting anybody to answer because it's a Sunday, right? So she went, oh, hello. I went, there's somebody here, right? I'm actually talking to somebody. So anyway, I told her that, my bully story, and she said, wow, that's an amazing story, but we don't hire people of older people, or, it's all about youth. I said, no, I understand that. No, I'm not asking for a job. I'm just trying to, I want to convey my bullying story because I think that there's lessons to be learned there. So then she came up with the idea that I should be on your podcast. And she connected me with Natasha, and we had a chat, which was lovely. And Natasha said that it was a great story and that she thought it would be good on your podcast to help any of your participants or any of your listeners who have been bullied to hear my story, because very rarely does the bully come forward.
Usually it's the bullied who say something, but the bullies kind of keep that to themselves in a lot of cases. So I'm thoroughly impressed that you are, so open and willing to share that. So let's get into it then. You've said that you were a bully as a child. So what did the bullying consist of, and how did you eventually grow to learn it was wrong?
I was only about 11 or 12, and
Mhm.
I there were 6 of us in my class that were very competitive for marks. There was me and this other girl and 4 boys. And I have no idea where the competitiveness came from because my parents are not like that. So that's number one thing, is that this was not about bad parenting. It was about bad childhood. Okay.
Mm.
And one day, the girl in our group got higher marks than me, and I was really, really pissed off at her. And I was very unpopular. I had no friends, quite frankly. I had no friends at all. I was what you consider, we called ourselves back then browners, um, meaning like nerdy or whatever. I spent lots of time in libraries and you
Okay.
know, writing great essays and or projects. They weren't essays back then,
Okay. Heard
that
of brown noser and things like that. I wasn't entirely sure what it meant. I was like, did I ever? And that, hearing that definition makes me realize, no, I was just a hermit as a child. I just,
anyway, I was really pissed off at her, and I knew that everybody hated me, but I knew that they hated her too. They hated the 6 of us, but
Mm.
that's irregardless of how I was feeling at that particular moment. I just really hated her. And I decided that I was going to start a hate club, an actual club where, people who hated her would be part of my club. And I went home and I don't know if you can see this. I just made this the other day. Are the initials the correct way?
If you pull
H.
up a little higher. Yes, they're the right way. Okay. Yes.
Okay. So I decided I was going to make this hate club. So I was going to make buttons. So the button stands for We Hate. S was her name, and C was the club. Okay. I attached safety pins on the back, and then I did this, and I have to say this. I have to read this because this is so true. So I consciously, carefully, and conspicuously, and my parents were home, but they were totally oblivious, crafted colorful circles of hate. Okay. After cutting out enough and, writing the initials on there and attaching the pins, I bring them to the class the next day and I hand them out, and people willingly took them. I told them what it was, and they were so it was so empowering, Carson, to have people pay attention to you. And
Yeah.
for 1 hour, I'm popular. Like all of a sudden, I was popular. It was amazing. Like it was an amazing thing, right?
Mm.
So an hour goes by, and all of a sudden, I get called down to the principal's office. And he holds up one of these buttons and he goes, "What is this?" And I said, I was very quick witted, which is amazing. And I'm sorry if I offend anybody by saying this, but I'll explain it. I said, "We hate Santa Claus," because I was Jewish. So that's the first thing that came to my mind. We hate Santa Claus. And of course, he didn't have any other student there to prove or disprove. So with just a bunch of initials, he couldn't say, well, but what he did say was, whatever it is, it's disgusting and it's going to stop now. So, like with my tail between my legs, I leave his office. And I was more humiliated that I got caught, not that I cared that I did something wrong. And obviously, I knew I was doing something wrong because I did it as initials and not with her actual name. I mean, I knew in my heart that it was wrong. And my teacher, like I was teacher's pet, and to have his pet, acting this way, he was disgusted with me. And my parents were so hurt. I was their perfect child who could do no wrong. And here I was doing this horrendous thing. And they had always taught me to treat people with dignity and respect and kindness the way I would want to be treated. So this was just mortifying for them.
Mm.
So then, the following year or the year after, I was going into grade 7. So it was a new school, a bunch of new kids, and I really wanted to try and integrate myself with them. So like I forgot about my, doing this hate club thing.
Mm.
And I tried to integrate with these other new students. And the girls used to shoplift, okay? They used to go to Simpsons or go to Eaton's.
Around a lot of people who were around when Simpsons was around back when I was growing up, and even still kind of today, actually.
It was a big department store. But anyway, we used to steal watch bands, and I did this knowing it was wrong, but knowing that I was being accepted by my peers, okay?
Mm.
And then we used to go on Yorkville Avenue. It was a very seedy place back then. There would be draft dodgers from the United States lying all over the ground doing drugs because they came up here so that they wouldn't have to go into the army. The Vietnam War was the
Oh,
one
yeah.
thing we were trying to avoid the war. And so we would go, and there was a store, and it's still there. It's a jean store now. I think it's called Rainbow. But they used to sell like these big lucite rings that were colorful inside and all these funky kind of jewelry things for the hippie days. So we would steal, and there was no security back then, and there were no cameras back then. And then one night I woke up, I had a dream that I had gotten caught, and was bawling my eyes out, but I did it quietly so my parents wouldn't hear me. And I was only in grade 7, but I had the wherewithal to say to myself, this is wrong. My parents don't deserve this. And why am I doing this? Like, really, why am I doing this? And I made a decision from that moment on that I would never, ever again do what anybody else wanted me to do so I could be friends with them. If they couldn't accept me for who I was, then I didn't want to be friends with them and I didn't care. And that held me in great stead because by the time I got to high school, it was a time of drugs and I was not into it. It just was not my thing. I didn't do it. My friends were doing it. It's not like they were drug addicts and crazy or whatever. I didn't condone their behavior. They didn't condemn their behavior. And, nobody stopped being friends with me because I didn't do the drugs. It was kind of weird. There were only 3 of us out of the whole group, kind of watching them or were like observers to their silly behavior. And, and then one night somebody had called the cops and we all had to rush out of there because I would have been taken down to the police station just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And I had a really hard time proving that I didn't do any of this. How do I prove that? They didn't have tests for marijuana or anything like that at the time.
Yeah.
So that's how it's been for the rest of my life. I am not friends with somebody because of what they tell me I have to be. I'm who I am, and you either like it or you don't be friends with me. And I don't care. I'm strong enough as a person that I don't need your friendship to hold me up. I need to be stronger for myself and believe in my values, which is steadfast, and has never changed, never altered.
First of all, thank you for sharing that. I think there's such an important message in, reminding people that you don't need to change yourself to fit in. Secondly, the visual aid, top notch. I'm very impressed that you brought a visual aid of the button and everything, because it helps with giving the picture. And what I find so interesting is just in how different people kind of interpret different things in their life. And because you went from doing the shoplifting behavior to being like, oh, I'm never going to do that. And that kind of strengthened your resolve to stay away from drugs. And then for me, it was like the substances came first and then the shoplifting behavior, because it was tied to me with addiction. That was something I really struggled with for a long time, due to finances and all these things. I don't know if you know much about my story, but I'm a recovering alcoholic. And part of that journey was when you're broke and you really needed a fix, you do things that you wouldn't necessarily do when you're not in that state of mind. So it's always so interesting to me to hear people's experiences with those specific topics from not an addict's lens, because it's like, whoa, that is like that I can't even like imagine that. Sharing how you really did not want to disappoint your parents, I really can understand that and feel that on various levels. So I genuinely believe there is someone out there who might be watching this podcast who's either going through similar things and is going to hear this and be like, oh, maybe I need to reframe how I'm looking at this, and it might change their life.
Yeah, I mean, we do have choices, but it's hard. I really, really give you credit. It takes a lot of courage for you to tell your story, and by you telling your story, you are helping other people. And I think it's amazing that you are in whatever point in time in your recovery that you are realizing, I think, that you can make choices. And it's not easy to make those choices because there's a lot of pressures coming from peers or coming from family or coming from all the problems that we have in the world today. So many pressures but really you just have to believe in yourself. And I'm so thrilled. I am thrilled to hear that you are starting to believe in yourself and you are putting yourself in the path of a positive way forward.
Aw, thanks.
You're welcome.
I feel like I just got like patted on the head through
Well,
Zoom.
it wasn't just a pat, it was a hug, a love hug. Okay. Yeah. I have to say, 30 years later, okay, I met the woman that I bullied. I was at a wedding, she was at a wedding. And all of a sudden I went, okay, you need to go and apologize. I'm an adult, I have kids, but still there's this reluctance and trepidation. So I go up to her, she remembers me. I said, I have to apologize for how I treated you when we were in grade 4 and 5 or 5 and 6, whatever grade. And she said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, oh, come on. And I didn't want to go over it again, because if she really didn't know what I was talking about, I didn't want to, revisit.
Hey, I'm going to make you remember this and then I'm going to apologize.
Right. So
no, I get it. I do. It
wasn't just that I started this hate club, but I also was physically abusive to her. I used to take an umbrella when it was raining, and I would chase her and I would be poking her butt with the umbrella. And then we used to wear knee socks, and my knee socks would unroll down and I would make her pull them back. I was very, very mean. So the brain has a way of either denying stuff or whatever, I don't know. But she said, I accept your apology, fine. And then but I still wasn't on the road of determining that I needed to get this story out there. I just had apologized. I felt better about it. And then in 2018, I went on the March of the Living, which is a trip to the Nazi concentration camps in Poland. And then we went to Israel afterwards. And no matter everything that I've ever read, heard, to actually be at a concentration camp is something I just can't even explain it. It was so powerful. And we marched from Auschwitz, the main camp, to Birkenau, where the train tracks were, where the trains were coming in, where the gas chambers was, and whatever. And so we marched. There were 30 or 40,000 of us, because it's an international program. It was started for youth originally, but then they decided to include adults, and it had always been it's a strange bucket list item, but it had always been on my bucket list for about 35 years. And so there were, these tens of thousands of people walking. I walked by myself, but I wanted to confront students to find out what this meant to them. And I asked one student what this meant to them. And he said, well, I know people who went on it, and they said it changed their life forever. And I said, well, how's it going to change your life? And he said, well, I'm going to go back and encourage people to come on this trip, and I'm going to get more involved in my community and, do nicer things for people. And I said, that's really great. And then I talked to another girl, and she was crying, and she had gone on the walk because her great-grandparents had been in the Holocaust. And so she was there for personal reasons. And I asked her what it meant to her and be on this walk. And she said, it brings her closer to understanding her family circumstance, and it would change the trajectory of what her career was going to be. She was going to go into some form of social justice, which she had never thought about doing before. And I told her how youth have always been at the forefront of changes, and that it was really important that youth recognize the power that they have to make positive changes. And so I came back home and I said, okay, this was so powerful for me, but how is this going to change my life? What am I going to do to change my life? And all of a sudden I thought, okay, well, the first thing I have to do is I have to go public with this bully story, right? And I was able to track the girl down. Her parents actually lived on my street. I thought, I'm being punished, because her parents are living on my street. I was able to track her down. We went for coffee, and again, I apologized. And she said, I honestly don't remember. I said, well, I'm really glad you don't remember. And she went on to be an accountant. She had a very successful life, good life. She raised children. So there wasn't this trauma attached to her with whatever it was that I did. And it was also a different time. I mean, back then, like if teachers didn't really get involved unless maybe there was a physical fight going on, but, even then, like if you came home and said, so-and-so punched me in the face, the father would say, punch him back, right? So there wasn't this trauma over everything that we just kind of dealt with things however we dealt with things. And for the most part, we don't have the traumas that are happening today, because there weren't all these counselors that would talk to us, and we didn't have any of that support. So we kind of had to just rely on ourselves to be able to move on. And then she felt so even more guilty because she told me she was the child of a Holocaust survivor. I'm going, oh my God. And that in itself is a trauma for people growing up in that world, right? For children whose parents were actually in the Holocaust,
I don't
to
know if you can tell, but I cannot hide my facial reactions. When you said that, I was like, because I was our next question was like, what inspired you to volunteer at the Holocaust Museum? And like, was it that, or was it the bullying experience? Did that play a role in that?
it probably did. It's probably some kind of repentance, but
Mm.
I promised her. I told her I want to get the story out. I will never, ever, ever, ever use her name. And
Yeah.
my last name now is my married name, so they can't connect me to any school. And if I don't know if anybody would even remember that incident, so long ago, and it didn't affect them really personally. I don't know. But she said no problem. So yeah, that's why I've been trying to get this story out there, because I do think that there are lessons to be learned about um, being a bully.
Yeah. So to kind of like take off from what I was pointing at just slightly earlier, so you mentioned that it probably was a form of repentance in a way to volunteer with the Holocaust Museum. So what is an important lesson you learned from that experience, from not only just like learning more about the Holocaust, but like your time with the Holocaust Museum? What has it taught you?
I just want to say that, like, I think all my involvement with the Holocaust over the years, or whatever charitable involvement I was involved with, I'm sure has something to do with repentance. That um, I want to make sure that I do some good things in the world to
Yeah.
kind of tamper down the bad things I did. I also kind of forgive myself for doing those bad things because I was young and stupid. Stupid would be a really good word to describe it. And I don't know of anybody who doesn't do stupid things when they're younger, and you don't think. And so all my involvement in the Holocaust, began with me being a docent in the Anne Frank exhibit, and me wanting to be a teacher, and then having to leave, and then um, and then being involved in Holocaust Education Week, and then all of the other organizations that are related to the Holocaust. But it was this March of the Living trip in 2018 that really, really put into focus where my purpose in life is. It really, and how I even quickly got to be a guide in the museum was I was asked to be a part of some other project that didn't fit what me. It didn't fit, and then the woman said, "Well, they're opening up the Holocaust Museum." This was like last spring. They're opening up the Holocaust Museum in June, and they're looking for volunteer guides. And I had, I was a guide at the Anne Frank exhibit, and then I was also a guide when they did a Warsaw Ghetto exhibit here, and so I uh, thought, oh, okay. Like, I knew they were opening up a museum, but it just never dawned on me. So this is one of those serendipitous moments in life that just happened. Like, I believe that luck plays a big part of what happens in your life. But I also believe that you have to put yourself in the path of luck. Like, if you just stay home and you never talk to anybody and you never communicate with anybody, and then that luck is not going to happen. But if somehow you're connected, open-minded, then that luck is going to play a
Oh
role.
yeah. Yeah, I believe everything comes in with being in a lot of like be there, put yourself out there, put in some work, and then a little bit of luck, and that's how things kind of go. That's how I've always believed things happen.
Yeah, and I believe that too. So what happened was, she had told me about the Holocaust Museum. She connected me with the person who was doing the hiring for the volunteers. And because I had such a wide range of volunteer experience involving the Holocaust, I was chosen. And I have to say that out of all the volunteering I have done over the years, which has been extensive, really extensive, um, this is the most important thing that I have ever done. And it's important to me because I'm meeting people from all over the world. It gives me amazing hope that people are coming into the Holocaust Museum who are not Jewish, who want to learn and who care. I especially love when we have the students come in. Plus, I'm learning all the time. It's a vast, vast subject, and it's just something that I'm always learning about. And I hope that at the end of the day that I'm making a difference in somebody's life by something I said or showed them in the museum that can make them think, and then they can change the trajectory of their life. I think, if we can all do that, and then I think that is an incredible thing. So for me, it's so ironic that I feel the most valued in the museum out of everywhere else that I am in this world. That's where I feel like I'm doing the most benefit for anybody. So
Yeah.
that was what inspired me to be at the museum.
That's amazing. Yeah. It really feels like in a lot of ways it's been intertwined in your lives. Like some might say even that it could be a fate thing. Would that feel accurate for you or no?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I had been struggling for years to determine what my life purpose is, right? Like you can have a dream, but your dream doesn't necessarily mean that that's what your life purpose should be. And I believe if you keep following your dream, somewhere along the way, the actual life purpose, the reason that you are here on this planet will become available to you. But you have to be open and you have to be able to see things in the bigger picture. And you have to be able to foresee what the possibilities are for you, because the possibilities for you, in my opinion, are endless. They're endless, endless, endless opportunities. But you have to put yourself in the mind frame of these possibilities.
That's yeah, a great message to share. Um, we're getting close to wrapping up, so I want to ask the last question, which you mentioned earlier. What's the number one message you want to give to youth today from everything that we've talked about?
So it's one message, but it's three parts. And the first thing is that you need to consider what you're doing that can be hurting somebody else. You need
Yeah.
to think about your own, okay? Anne Frank said that if you want change to happen, you have to look within.
Yeah.
So the first thing you have to do is you have to see, what am I doing that might be hurting or upsetting somebody else? And when you come to the realization what that might be, I think you need to confront that person. You need to apologize, and then you need to listen to them. You need to be in their space and understand what what they're saying and why what you did was hurtful, or because we tend to always just look at ourselves and go, well, they're what they're doing to me, what they're destroying in me, but we never look at what we might be doing to somebody else. And so this is called empathy. You have to have empathy. It is absolutely critical in this world to have empathy. And then the next thing is you have to stop self-sabotaging your own life. You know, what are what are you doing? Are you looking at your flaws? Are you I'm trying to understand your mistakes, how you can be resilient and take the necessary steps to fix what you're in control of. And we're not in control of everything. We have to understand that, like things happen in life. Cancer happens, and sometimes it's through no fault, and it's not because you're a smoker or whatever else. It just happens, and you have to be able to um, look at that scenario and say, yeah, like you can say, woe was me, and then you have to say, okay, but do I want to be a victim for my whole life? Or how do I move forward? How do I move forward? So this is, I say, you can make choices. There are choices. We think we don't have any choices, but it's just a matter of sitting down and looking into yourself, being honest with yourself. Okay. And there's usually other people that can help you through that.
Oh, yeah.
But don't rely so much on other people. You also have to rely on yourself because you know yourself best. So that's um, resilience. So there's empathy, there's resilience, and then you have to be resourceful. You have to be able to think out of the box. And some people are just born more resourceful than others, but it is a skill that can be taught. You can be taught to look at the bigger picture of things and say, okay, it didn't work this way, so what can I try next to see what will work? So the three things are empathy, resilience, and resourcefulness.
Wow. I feel like you were directly giving me some of those messages because yeah, it is interesting everything that you've shared today. I'm like deep in my own like thoughts right now. I like I'm a little all over. So pardon me if this is a little clunky, but um yeah, I think that a lot of people are really going to resonate with this. If anyone listening to this needs to resources or needs somewhere to talk, we have links to resources on our website at youthspeak.ca. They're culturally specific, so especially if you're in the Ontario area, consider checking out our website for resources. I felt like that was important to note here since we were talking about resourcefulness and everything. Um, but yes, Heather, thank you for sharing your story.
Oh my goodness. It's such it's like relieving a burden. But,
Yeah.
I really hope that this will be the start of many times when I'm able to share this story and yeah, and I feel better because I hope that people who have been bullied or bullied have been bullied or who are bullies. Because, like I said, usually the bully doesn't come forward because they're embarrassed or, you know, for whatever reason, or maybe they don't feel any guilt and they feel no connection to what it was that they do. But once we lose the ability to understand how we can hurt other people, then we've lost our humanity.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that's real. That is very real. And things can definitely shift in life where you might kind of dip in and out of feeling that empathy. I can say that from my own experience, just from uh, traumas and stuff. You can develop a lack of empathy from that. So, working hard to maintain that, it is something that is hard to do, and that's why I share the resources because that's might be something that where you would want to reach out for support, especially if you're young, because it's not easy to navigate on your own, let alone as a youth.
Yeah, and I just say as my line, it's hard work. It's hard work to know yourself and to forgive yourself and to forgive somebody else. It's very hard work, but you're worth it. You have to believe that you are worth it.
Yeah, took me a few years myself to forgive myself for a lot of things I've done, so I definitely can relate to that.
You're proof that you're worth it. You're proof that you can turn your life around, and it's not easy. And I'm sure you've had many challenges, and you probably will. Till the day you die, you will have challenges in life. You
Oh,
will.
I still do every
That's
day.
right. But the fact that you're here that is a major stepping stone to
Oh, yeah.
progress and to, overcoming and, and to helping other people overcome. So you see, you are worth it. Every minute of your life has been worth it for you and for other people.
Yeah, that's why I similarly, like, I love what I do here with this job, because in the same ways that you were describing here, like getting that off your chest and sharing that and hoping that it helps. That's always been something I've wanted to do. Like ever since I was young, all I've known, I haven't known what I was going to do or how I was going to do it. I just knew I was going to help people. That's just
Yeah.
always what I've known. So being able to take something that was so negative in my life, something that caused me a lot of pain and, in a lot of ways nearly cost me my life, uh, turning that around and finding the support and being able to share that with people is been massive. It's I hope at least it's inspired people. I know that your story is going to inspire people. It inspires me. And again, thank you for coming on this show. Is there anything you want to highlight, promote, social medias that you're comfortable with sharing, anything like that before we wrap up?
Well, I just really want to promote people to go to the Holocaust Museum. It's in Toronto. You can go on Toronto Holocaust Museum. I can send Natasha the link. If you're a student and you show ID, it doesn't cost you anything. Or there's a whole list of how you can get in if for free. Otherwise, it's $18. But trust me, it's $18 well worth your money. And the reason I'm saying this is because it shows the trajectory of hate, how it starts with a thought, turns into words, turns into actions, turns into violence, can turn into death. And some of the things that happened then are happening now. We can see this. And we need to be able to stop this distraction. But it's also a museum about resilience, about survival, about hope, because the last gallery in the museum is Life in Canada, and 35,000 Jewish people came to Canada from Europe after the war and settled here, and all of them, most of them, I would say, not all of them, no, I don't know all of them, but most of them that I've met, and I've met dozens and dozens and dozens, have made major contributions to this country and to their community. But they came here with, all their family had been murdered. They didn't have a home to go back to. They didn't have jobs. They couldn't speak the language. And somehow, some way, they found a way to move on with their lives. And that doesn't mean that they don't have traumas and they don't have, experiences that remind them of those things. And, but for the most part, most of them have been able to have a life, create a life that's powerful and positive. So for no other reason, that's why you need to go to this Holocaust Museum.
Yeah, and we will have the link to all the information regarding the Holocaust Museum in the description of the C2 video, so you can go check that out. With all that said, thank you, Heather. Thank you, TD, for partnering with us on our podcast and IG Lives. Check out our other social media. YouthSpeak Can. I feel like promoting that feels weird since we were just talking about the Holocaust Museum, but here we are. And we will see you with another podcast episode soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Carson. Have a great day.
Thank you.
If you want to hear more stories, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like. To support more youth by youth led projects, visit us at youthspeak.ca, where you can donate and spread youth mental health awareness.
YouthSpeak Charity. Speak, inspire, change.